Good evening. Gordon Causey here it is now Thursday evening at 10:14, I think for the first time ever, a little bit early. And before I get rolling, talking about biblical prophecy, I wanted to share something that might be seen as a joke, although it might be seen also as a parable. It's a story I've known for years. There's a gentleman living in a low-lying area near a major river, and the river is overflowing its banks. And so trucks are sent out to the affected area to rescue people from the coming flood. And there's a devoutly religious man at his house, and the truck comes by, and they implore this gentleman to get in the truck to be saved from the flood. And this devoutly religious man says, "No, my faith is in God. The Lord will save me." Well, the river overflows its banks. It breaks through the levees. The waters rise, and this guy's up on the roof of his house, and a boat is sent by. And the boat, it's a little outboard, 12 footers, whatever, comes by, and they beckon the man off of the peak of his roof, and they say, "Come down, get in the boat. We're here to rescue you." And again, the man says, "My faith is in God. The Lord will rescue me." Well, the waters keep rising, and eventually the man is clinging to his chimney. Has to climb right up to the top of his chimney, and now a helicopter comes by, and they drop a rope, one of those rope ladders. And with a blowhorn, again, they beckon the man and say, "Jump up, climb on. We're here to save you." And the man again says, "My faith is in God. The Lord will save me." Well, the waters rise even higher, and he's swept away and eventually drowns. And when he comes before the Lord, he says, "God, I had faith until the end. Why didn't you save me?" And the Lord answers and says, "I sent a truck, a boat, and a helicopter." Take that for what it's worth. Prophecy is a difficult nut to crack because, as I wrote in the description, so often we don't recognize the fulfillment of prophecy until after the fact. And so what use is prophecy if you don't recognize that it's been fulfilled until after it's been fulfilled? And we all have just lived through the past 2+ years, going back to March of 2020. And I think the most obvious prophetic word from the Bible that even non-Christians were, I think, opening their eyes to comes from Revelation chapter 13, starting in verse 16 and going through to the end of the chapter. Let me find 16. And it has to do with the mark of the beast. And a lot of, even as I say, even non-Christians were wondering whether this vaccine passport was the mark of the beast. And this is what it says in Revelation chapter 13, starting in verse 16, going through to the end of the chapter. "Also, it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let him who has understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number. Its number is 666. So again, even non-Christians know 666, the number of the beast. If you're a heavy metal fan, there's a song by Iron Maiden. Pardon me. And we all know what happened when the vaccine passports were imposed, and that took place in Ontario, Canada, where I live, September 22nd until March. And I forget what date exactly in March was finally lifted. But during that roughly 6-month window, you were not allowed to be a full participant in society unless you had the jab. You couldn't sit down and have a cup of coffee. Your travel was restricted. In some cases, some people lost their jobs or had to choose to leave their jobs because it was mandated. You buying and selling in the marketplace, working, being a full participant in society was not permitted unless, and in my view, the most heinous, the most egregious application of this passport were some churches. Some churches required attendees to show proof of vaccination to attend a worship service. I've said before, and I still hold this opinion, that any church that mandated that someone show proof of vaccination, that is not a church. They prostituted themselves. And but it's symbolic language when we talk about this calls for wisdom. Let him who has understanding reckon the number of the beast, for it is a human number. Its number is 666. I think in today's world, we have difficulty understanding biblical language. I know I do, because it was a different world back then. The symbols and the meaning behind numbers and such that existed 2,000 and more years ago does not exist anymore. What do we know of the number 6? 6 is a human number. It's in the creation account from Genesis. It is on the 6th day that man was created. It's also one short of the number 7. 7 in biblical terms means fulfillment, completion. 7 is a godly number. 6 is one less. So, but is it, some looked at the Vax Pass and said, well, it's not the mark of the beast. There's no physical mark. There's no marking on the forehead or the hand. And there's a passage that I can thank the pastor at the church I was attending and have been attending. Thanks, Ryan. He passed this on to me. And it's from Deuteronomy. Chapter 4, and I'm going to start in verse 8. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Sorry. Deuteronomy chapter 6, and reading from verse 4 to 8. So, chapter 6, starting in verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God is one Lord, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be upon your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. And you shall bind them as a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as a frontlet between your eyes. Now, did that literally mean, is Deuteronomy saying that people are to physically write on their hand or their hands and physically have a frontlet between their eyes? Or is this figurative symbolic language? I would submit it's figurative symbolic language, the same as in Revelation 13:16, a mark upon your hand, a mark upon the forehead. If you think about our hands, it involves our activity, what we do, work. And the frontlet between the eyes or the forehead, those are our thoughts. And so I see a definite parallel between those two things. But the problem with prophecy is, as I was saying before, what good is prophecy if you don't recognize it until after the fact? If you don't realize what's happening when it's happening in real time when you're living. And this has some precedence in the Bible, because in Jesus's time, Jesus was a fulfillment of prophecy. And the religious people of Jesus's day did not believe that the prophecy was being fulfilled in their own time. They rejected it. What was written by Joel, what was written by Hosea, what was written by Daniel was all fine and good in the abstract, but not when it was happening right in front of their very eyes. When Jesus went into the temple, as recorded in Luke, and read from the scroll, the Bible back then wasn't called the Bible. They had scrolls, and he was handed the scroll of Isaiah, and he read from Isaiah and said, this is being fulfilled now. And the difficulty is now, some looked at the vaccine passport and they said, well, it's not the same. And that's what they said in Jesus's time. They said, well, it's not the same. I don't script these. So I'm merely talking off the top of my head, as it were. And we've seen the vaccine passport so far has gone away back in March in Ontario. Although, from what I understand, there are still some employers who are requiring their employees, if they want to be fully participant, if they want to be employed, not only do they have to get the vaccines, but they have to get the boosters as well to maintain their employment. And that's worrisome. And as well, worrisome is the fact that the infrastructure now has been firmly put in place and at some point, and I'm not making any predictions here, but I do think it's wise to be aware of the fact that the infrastructure around the vaccine passport is still in place. And all it would take, I submit, is for the proper conditions to either come about or to be brought about, orchestrated, if you will, getting on to this bivalent booster shot. We know now that the original 2 shots don't work. They don't stop people from getting sick, and they don't stop people from passing it on, which was the whole rationale behind the introduction of the VaxPass, was that it was for community safety, that the infection would stop, that each vaccinated person would present a roadblock to the virus, that it wouldn't be able to infect that person and then use that person to go and infect someone else. That was the whole basis for the VaxPass. And that's been blown up. And now they have a booster that is said to combat, or is targeted toward, the Omicron variant and its subsequent subvariants. That's what they say. Do we believe them? Do I believe them? No. I think that will come as a shock to absolutely nobody. They said that the original shot was 95% effective. That turned out to be garbage. And now the same authorities who were so horribly wrong the first time expect us to believe them this time. Pass. But we saw what happened, the degree to which fear can be used to control a population. And there are signs happening right now indicating, well, it was in CBC News today. Just go to my news feed. Saying, this from CBC News, Ontario's COVID-19 hospitalizations highest in 8 months, 121 new deaths reported. And I'm seeing more and more of this type of reporting. Children's Health Network sees unprecedented ER demand as COVID and RSV cases surge. I've talked about RSV a number of times as being an incredibly common virus, one they tried to develop an mRNA vaccine for and failed. Every mRNA vaccine that they ever tried to develop failed. Never got out of the clinical trial process ever. And I want to keep this somewhat focused on prophecy, because one of the difficulties of prophecy is it's just part and parcel of human nature, is the fact that we're impatient and we want everything to be right now. And if you look at, there are two types when it comes to what's called eschatology, which is merely a fancy word for biblical end times prophecy. When you look at end times prophecy, there are, I would submit, there are two types of end times. There are end times, and then there are the end times. And biblical scholars, theologians will talk about the fact that the people of Jesus's day, his generation, if you will, they saw an end of their world happen around 70 AD, about 40 years after Christ's death and resurrection. There was an end to the world that the Jewish people knew until that time, because Rome came in and they destroyed the Second Temple, and the diaspora took place, and Masada, if you want to look up that little point in history. There was an end to their world. It wasn't the end of the world, but it was the end of their world. And that happened in Old Testament times as well. The Assyrians conquered Israel, the northern kingdom of Israel. The Babylonians came in and conquered the southern kingdom of Judah. So there's this, and that's an end of a world, not the end of the whole world. So are we entering the end? Are we entering a end times? Are we entering the end times? That's an open question, and I'm not going to answer or even attempt to answer, because it's just simply too difficult. We have this great reset that's being punted by the World Economic Forum, by Klaus Schwab and guys like his evil little minion Yuval Noah Harari, who are talking about ushering in a new world order. They're talking about the transhumanist world, or the biodigital world, where the living organisms like human beings, that we become basically digital machines. Canada's own government has an agency referred to as Horizons Canada, that you can go to horizons.gov.ca, and they've written up exactly where they see this world going, where they see biodigital convergence and transhumanism taking us. And this Yuval Noah Harari is on public record. He stands up in front of the World Economic Forum at one of their conferences where they have hundreds, perhaps 1,000 or more people in attendance. It's hard to say. It's an auditorium. And he's talking to the world's uber wealthy, the people with the power, money, and influence they have their hands on the levers that directs society and societies. And he's telling the world that human beings, that this notion of humanity as having a soul is over, that human beings now have reached a point where we're no more than hackable organisms. And he'll use the term the surveillance state. And this is not, I find it ironic that, it's spelled out plainly and clearly by the World Economic Forum's top advisor. And again, his name is Yuval, Y-U-V-A-L, Noah, like Noah's Ark, Harari. I don't know how to spell Harari, but if you just type into YouTube here, Y-U-V-A-L, Noah, and it'll populate the rest for you. And you can watch. It's not conspiracy theory. This is what the World Economic Forum has planned. And we can't expect our media to expose it, because our media is part of the machinery. When the World Economic Forum meets, the powers behind our media are in attendance and are fully on board. We're being herded. And in the Christian faith, Jesus is the good shepherd. And are we going to listen to the voice of the good shepherd? Or are we going to listen to the voice of the other shepherds? And there's a multitude of them. So, short little video, just something that I wanted to share. But the simple fact of the matter is, and I'll end it with, I don't know how long this is going to take. After Jesus' death and resurrection, it was roughly 40 odd years until that end took place. Then we have the end. And you're hearing a lot of Christians saying, we are living in the end times. And how long will it last? 10 years, 30 years, 50 years, 100 years? Who's to say? But we're heading into a world that is the foundations of our society, what's left of them, the moorings are being pulled out. And if you read to the end of the book, and I've said this before, so I will end it definitively with this. There are those who are looking to a political solution, to a Donald Trump, to a Pierre Poilievre, to some other political figure to kind of send everything crashing down. I'll tell you right now, you will be disappointed. Those who are putting their faith in someone like a Peter McCulloch or a Robert Malone or a Dr. Michael Yeadon, some eminently qualified doctor who's doing everything they can to expose this. If your faith is in that person, you will be sadly disappointed. If your faith is in a public figure like a Robert Kennedy or someone else to send this whole thing crashing down, again, you will be disappointed. There is only one in whom victory is assured, and that one is in Jesus Christ. Actually, I'm going to go on a little bit more because this occurred to me the other day when I was driving, and it has to do with a horizon. And if you don't know, the horizon is where the sky meets the landscape. And our ability, our where the horizon is, depends a lot on our elevation. When you're down at ground level, the horizon is very close. The higher you go up, the further that horizon, it's pushed back into the distance. The horizon is much further out. And I think that when we are earthbound, when we're bound down in this beastly world that we all live in, that our horizon is nowhere near as far out as it needs to be, that we need to look at things from a higher elevation to see how far out the horizon truly is. And the horizon that I'm referring to when I talk about victory is I'm talking about eternity. And that's a difficult, eternity is a, talk about a tough nut to crack. How do you even conceptualize something that has no end? And so I think those, if your horizon is short, well, then maybe putting false hope in a political, legal, or popular figure, well, might as well, because your horizon is far too short to begin with. But if you can look at things higher up, elevate yourself, and see that the horizon is much further off, so far it's beyond human sight, then you might just understand what I'm talking about that I've explained so badly. But at any rate, I'll end it there. God bless. And comments are welcome. Talk to you later.